The video opens with a number of aerial shots of the coastline, showing the Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant next to it. There are many shots of the beautiful shoreline with large rocks settled in the azure-colored ocean. We also see walking trails through the low shrubbery along the hillside. We see various angles on the power plant, showing us the two large concrete domes and electric transmission lines leading away from the plant up through the hills. Two people ride in a motorboat along the shoreline. There is an aerial shot of a charming ocean town with palm trees on the streets and two long piers jutting into the bay.
Welcome to the Diablo Canyon Properties Power Plant Campus and Marina, located along the heart of San Luis Obispo County's coastline. These spectacular properties span more than 14 miles of scenic coastline and are comprised of more than 10,000 acres of pristine land. This is the location of California's last operating nuclear power plant, with a campus and a marina that offer immediate access to California's deep coastal waters and beautiful rugged coast. The main access to the site is through the town of Avila Beach.
More aerial shots of small trees and black cattle grazing in the shrub-covered hillside next to the ocean's edge. There is a PGE logo on a blue background. Closer time-lapse shots of the two concrete domes as the fog ebbs and flows during the day. A man drives a forklift. A disclaimer on the bottom of the screen says pre-COVID-19 footage.
With a 7-mile private road winding up the coast. Most of the property is maintained in its natural state with limited public access both north and south of the plant and cattle grazing along the coastal terraces. Pacific Gas and Electric Company, known as PG&E, is the guardian of these irreplaceable natural and cultural resources through an award-winning and comprehensive land stewardship program. After traveling the beautiful coastal road for about 10 minutes, the first features to catch your eye on the campus are the containment domes for Unit 1 and Unit 2. These unique structures house the reactors, which generate enough carbon-free electricity to power the lives of more than 3 million Californians, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. These structures are more than 3 feet thick and are made of reinforced concrete and steel. They are planned to be removed as part of PG&E's decommissioning project after the plant ceases operations.
Time-lapse footage of workers walking in and out of a concrete building with a large metal PGE logo on it. Exterior shots of a water treatment facility. There's a long row of green metal canisters with pipes going in and out of them. There are long tubes stacked in metal shelving and many large green pipes with red shutoff levers connected to metal boxes. A shot of a small outdoor electric substation on the hillside. Various shots of the large concrete PG&E building. Two firefighters have a discussion in front of their trucks next to the ocean. Men in black long-sleeve shirts and camo pants shoot at targets on an outdoor shooting range.
Diablo Canyon is in many ways like a small self-contained island with a population of 1,400 nuclear professionals making electricity for their customers. Diablo Canyon makes its own fresh water from ocean water, which is desalinated on-site via an extensive reverse osmosis system. The Diablo campus has its own on-site water treatment facilities, sewer treatment system, and an abundant supply of electricity that powers the various warehouses, machine shops, office buildings, and multi-use facilities. It also has its own fire department, medical facilities, firing range, and its own security force.
There's a large concrete pad with many rows of large gray-green metal canisters bolted to the pad. We see the same canisters from an aerial view and see an empty pad next to them with circles, as well as a large turquoise-colored pool of water. Various shots of the metal canisters. There's a man with a clipboard and two workers in white hazmat-looking suits and white helmets using a tool on a metal ring. Workers in the same white suits are moved across in an interior pool of water that has a metal grid in it by a mobile platform.
A used fuel storage facility is located on a terrace to the east of the plant at more than 300 feet above sea level and is not visible from the main campus. This area, roughly the size of a football field, will eventually contain all the fuel used to power Diablo Canyon during its 40-year span of operation. It's a separately licensed and permitted facility, making it distinct from Diablo Canyon Power Plant. The fuel is stored here on an interim basis and is in robust canisters ready for transport to a future repository. PG&E is focused on the continued safe, reliable operations of Diablo Canyon Power Plant through the end of its operating licenses in 2024 and 2025 to support California's clean energy goals.
A worker standing outside on a platform next to one of the large concrete domes reaches for a piece of equipment hanging from a crane. The final shot is another aerial shot of the power plant. A title fades in. It reads www.pge.com/Diablo decommissioning.
At the same time, PG&E is preparing for the immediate decommissioning of the power plant, repurposing of the marina and other campus assets, and the ultimate disposition of these properties. For more information about the power plant, please visit www.pge.com/Diablo decommissioning.